microdissolved of A plus Turing. I'm doing this brief introduction here for my Loveland students in Ohio to let them know about the top 1% techniques I've been showing students in that area and in Cincinnati to get great scores on the ACT. So let's get started. Here I have a sample test here at actstudent.org, and you can see that I'm on the essay portion right now. So if I back up here, you'll see that the sample questions are in each area. The first one is English, and English tends to be the most complex area to do great in, but it's also where I've seen the most students get the most perfect scores. So the way we do this is to first start with our verb, which leads us to our subject. Once you find your verb and your subject, then you can also check for objects or complements. Along the way, you want to also check for conjunctions because they'll change the nature of what's going on. So once you get that basic structure in your sentence, you then think in categories. So you might underline. So if we look at an example here in the English section, if we scroll down, we have a question like number 4. So it's actually asking us to do something specific rather than have us just change something in our question. So in this case, which choice would be most effectively introduce the rest of the paragraph? So we'll see that's going to get into a more complex skill, but normally we're thinking in categories. So here I put CL for classify, and those categories are grammatical marks, modifiers, verbs, and parallelism. So, of course, grammatical marks are when we would add, subtract, or change things like periods, commas, semicolons, apostrophes. Modifiers would not only include adjectives and adverbs, but also idioms. And the things about idioms are that there are prepositions involved, especially with parallelism. So you want to watch for those because we'll often need to repeat a word, or at least the type of word, before and after the conjunction when we see that we do have an idiom and that we do have a preposition. Under verbs, we actually have 4 subcategories. So we'll have person, like first, second, third, singular, plural, if you know Spanish or Latin or French. We have mood. Under mood, we have the indicative, which is how we normally speak, like I see the girl across the road. We also have the subjunctive. And 2 things to know about the subjunctive is that we never use was, we have to use were, and that we have to use the base form of the verb. So the subjunctive is for a wish, a request, or a condition contrary to fact. We also have the imperative, which is fairly straightforward. It has the same basic form as the subjunctive, except it's the command like stop it. Tense, we especially want to be aware of sequence of tenses. That's when we have a perfect tense, like a past perfect, present perfect, or a future perfect, in reference to another tense, like the past in reference to the past perfect. So the past perfect occurs before the past tense, like I had woken up after the dog went into the room. So that's the sequence of tenses. And that includes all of those perfect tenses. Finally, we have voice under verbs. So with voice, we're talking about what active versus passive. So I threw the boy versus the boy was thrown by me. We prefer the active. And then we have parallelism, which we implied here when we were talking about prepositions. So parallelism is when we repeat structure to make a comparison. So I was neither happy with nor angry about the decision. We have similar structure, adjective and preposition on both sides of our conjunction. Or give me liberty or give me death. Give me, liberty, death. They're balanced. And finally, when we go through these categories, we are making our predictions. So you're going to correct whatever is wrong. For example, here in 4, we have a potential mistake. So you go through your categories and you see if one of those mistakes has been triggered. And then finally, you're going to correlate that prediction with your choices and say which one of those predictions matches up with my choice. We do all of this based on the 2 master rules. Like accuracy, you don't want to change what the author probably means. And efficiency, you want to say it in as few words as possible. Those are the basic grammar steps. As we'll see, we also have inferential reasoning and detecting detailed questions. Even more so main ideas. So as long as you use these 2 categories, you'll be fine. And we're going to talk about that in the reading. But the idea is that sometimes we have to get the idea. For example, in number 4, if we want to introduce the rest of the paragraph, what we're doing is looking for what the sentence attaches to, before and after. You get the ideas. So how did this sentence end? How did this sentence begin? And you want an idea that would fit those 2 like a puzzle piece. So that's the grammar section. If we back up now, we see that there's also math. Obviously, you can have general mathematics, algebra, and pre-algebra, geometry, even a little bit of trigonometry here in the math. And the way we're going to break down our questions is, number 1, just like in grammar, we will underline here. That will let us then relate. So underlining is when we set everything up. Like if we have x plus y equals 7 below that, we would write x minus y equals 2. So we line up our equations. We show what we're looking for. If it's 2x, for example, we make that equal to question mark. You want to complete any angles, extend your line so you can see all your angle measurements. You're going to show whether something's the same or different. So just set up as much as you can in the beginning. So that's the relate step. The relate step, to fill it out, we also have coefficients, denominators, and exponents. So we'll see those relationships filled out like this. So if I have 4c plus c, well, that's the same thing as 4c plus 1c, right? We also have something like 4c squared. So if I did 4c squared and multiply times 1c, well, that's the same thing as 1c to the first. Or if I have, 4 over 5 times 4, well, that's the same thing as 4 over 5 times 4 over 1. So we're just going to fill out those relationships so we can see things more easily, and it prevents us from making mistakes. We also have the simplify or factor step. So we take out the thing in common. When we factor, when we simplify, we put like things together. The 4th step is operations. This is when we combine equations, like in this problem. We add, subtract, divide, or multiply one equation by the others. It's the most experimental step. And then substitution is when we plug in an easy number to work with, plug in the choices, or plug in something actually in the problem. So that sums up the basic strategies we need for the math. Sometimes we do have more involved questions where you need to look at the end, then the beginning, glance at the choices, see what form you ultimately need. Don't forget where you are right now. So look at what you have in front of you at the time you're doing the problem. And then 5 here represents, have you done the 5 steps that are up here? So the next part of the test, as we'll see, is the reading. And in the reading part, we're also going to be underlining. It's important to underline in our questions first to get the ideas that we need in the end. So we have underline the context ideas in your question. You're going to classify the question into one of 4 categories: main idea, detecting detail, inferential reasoning, and tone or persona. We don't see a lot of tone or persona questions. It's about a feeling in the passage or an occupation the author might have. We mostly see a little bit of main idea. So we read the first 2 sentences, last 2 sentences of the passage, unless it's this literary narrative. This is really when we should read the first 4. Underline our ideas. Sometimes we'll see some dialogue. So we want to label who is speaking. So if it's Father Mason, maybe we put FM off to the side before we get started, so we can know where we're going. We do the same thing at the end. We read the last 4 sentences to get our context. Otherwise, in all the other types of passages, we're just going to read the first 2 and last 2 sentences. So we synthesize those ideas, all the ideas we've underlined in those sentences, into a prediction, trusting the end more than the beginning, and we'll scribble that down as our prediction for our main idea. Detecting detail is going to be very direct. It's a little bit more common than main idea, like where did the little monkey leave the green banana when the zookeeper caught him playing with a fish? So we need little monkey, green banana, zookeeper playing with fish in the location, and we're done. Inferential reasoning is more about an idea. So while detecting detail questions force us to keep looking, inferential reasoning questions are about an idea. We'll see words like reasonably inferred, or could, or should, or may, or might, or probably, possibly. That's when we want to read one sentence before the clue in the passage and one sentence after. And again, we're going to underline the ideas that are relevant and synthesize them into a prediction. So this is the most common question, whether it's the English section or reading or science. It's the most common question on the test. And it's the most difficult too. As we said, 10% is more about a feeling. We don't normally see that on the ACT. But you do treat it like main idea, read the first 2, last 2, and synthesize your answers to a prediction. So we go to the right part of the passage, as we said, based on our prediction. We underline the clues we find there. We could synthesizing them, predicting our answer, and then correlate that with the choices. So the element of prediction separates my 80 percentile students from my 99 percentile students. So that's one of the most important facets of these steps. Going on to the science section, which is going to be the 4th section on the test. We're going to use the same basic steps that we had here in reading, except we won't really have main idea. We won't have tone persona. It'll just be detecting detail and inferential reasoning. So rather than say go to the right part of the passage, it's mostly about the proper picture, chart, table, or graph. So these tend to be very chart, table, graph oriented. Notice this one is more about scientist 1 and scientist 2. But about 80% of the passages are going to be more like a chart or a graph. For example, this table here is central to what we're doing, just like this chart here in passage 2. When you do have no specific charts, tables, or graphs, we do want to differentiate scientist 1 versus scientist 2 with a chart like this, and compare what one believes versus the other. That way, it can help you with more than one question. So the key is if you do have a picture, and most of the time you will have a picture, you want to fill it out as much as possible. So, for example, here we have a formula. So you can note how many, what the ratio is um, of each element to the other. So here we have 1 to 4. Here we want to notice any trends, like something's increasing or decreasing, or if the pattern continues, or we need to put things in the right order. If it's about time, we put the time in the right order. So we're putting things in the right order. We're extending lines. We're showing whether something's increasing or decreasing or going left or going right. The key is to fill these out as much as you can. Maybe you're asked about millimeters, so you change your centimeters to millimeters. Write as much as you can to fill out your chart, table, or graph so you can see what's going on. So otherwise, if the chart, table, or graph doesn't give you the information you need, you do go to the rest of the passage and make sure that you get the proper details just like you would in the reading section. Finally, we have our writing section. And notice that the prompts have changed in the past 6 months to reflect the new nature of the ACT. So the ACT got their act together before the SAT did. And we actually have perspectives that we need to comment on. So we're trying to get into the mind of the author and ask ourselves, how would I defend this position or this position or this position? So with each of these, we want to analyze and evaluate the perspective, state and develop your own perspective on the issue, and explain the relationship between your perspective and those given. So we can summarize and try to defend and point out weaknesses in each perspective, show whether we agree with one, or we have our own unique perspective that doesn't agree with any of them. So in essence, we still want to construct something like a 4-paragraph essay to do that. One can be a summary of the question in general. Another one can be a larger paragraph with all 3 perspectives taken in. Then you can talk about your own perspective, and then you can summarize the problem again and talk about why you chose the perspective that you did. So if you're not familiar with the writing section, check out the writing sample here at actstudent.org so you can get some good practice in and get some feedback from your teachers or a good tutor. Because all of these will be the same. Basically the essay task and then planning the essay. You can download this and print it off. So those are my tips here for my Loveland students. Appreciate your being with me today. If you have any questions, I'm here at md@aplustutoring-testprep.com. I'll also put my phone number if you need to talk to me. Again, this is Michael DeSalvo at A Plus Tutoring, signing off. And thanks for being with me today. I'll catch up with you later. I'm here at 513-939-9033 or aplustutoring-testprep.com, and that's A Plus Tutoring all spelled out.